Welcome to this discussion about racism in the belly dance community. My name is Salit, and I'm the founder of SHEBA, a place to learn belly dance that focuses on female empowerment, positive body image, and community. And as an educator, as a community leader, as a dancer, as an individual, I felt obligated to be a part of the solution and not the problem. So I didn't quite know how to do that. I still don't have the answers, but I wanted to shine a light on the problem as a first step. And I believe we should always check our backyard first before trying to change the world, making sure that our immediate community is on the right path. So this is why I decided to do this. This panel is titled, Let's Talk About Racism, simply because racism is a very uncomfortable topic for people to talk about. Some people just think it doesn't exist, that it is a thing of the ugly past, or some just don't want to talk about it. However, as you will soon hear for yourselves, it absolutely exists. And we as a society, if we don't admit it and openly talk about it, we will never be able to truly move forward and reach equality. Because how can we solve a problem if we don't admit it's there, if we don't call it by its name? Joining us today are professional dancers Tarik Sultan and Lara Adrienne. They will each tell you about themselves. They'll tell you who they are and what they've done, and they will share personal stories and their experiences as Black individuals and Black dancers. At the end, you will have a chance for Q&A, so you can ask them directly. One last thing I want to say, participation in this panel is free, since everyone should hear this and understand the very real struggle that our Black sisters and brothers go through on a daily basis. However, we are accepting donations that will go directly to our panelists and support them and their vulnerable emotional position right now for that they are with sharing this. And the rest will go to the Pretty Brown Girl organization, which is devoted to educating and empowering girls of color and teaching them to love themselves and appreciate their beauty, which I find a very, very important cause. So I'll drop the donation info in the chat for you, and also post it on Facebook and social media. See, if I don't read directly what I wrote, I get lost. All right, so we will start with Miss Lara. So let me spotlight Lara.
Hi, I see a lot of people I know, a lot of people I don't know. Welcome to my kitchen. So thank you for coming, Salit. Thank you for organizing this. Salit and I have already discussed more or less what we're going to cover. So just to quickly introduce myself, I have a list of the first questions here. So I'm just going to introduce myself. My name is Lara Adrienne. I've been dancing since 2005. I started performing probably around 2008. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, but I went to school in Washington, D.C. So, and I have family there. So when I'm not in Istanbul, I usually fly to Washington, D.C. That's where my family is, or California. That's where my rest of my family is. I live in Istanbul. I've been living here off and on for my entire adult life, but most recently 4 consecutive years. I work at a place called Sultana's, and sometimes I do other gigs as well, but Sultana's is my main gig. It's a touristic place. A lot of you may have heard of it. Yeah, 7 days a week, dinner show. It's really fun. I hope we open again soon. My dance and movement experience and accomplishments. Well, I came to Turkey, and I was able to carve out a life for myself. And I'm working 7 nights a week. I've worked in Bodrum. I've worked in Alanya. I've worked with the band Babazula. I was also selected to be on Al Rakisa, that Egyptian belly dance competition show. I didn't win, but it was definitely an interesting experience, to say the least. Yeah, I teach sometimes. I don't teach regularly, but a lot of times tourists will come to Istanbul and they'll find me either through Sultanas or through some other channel, and I'll teach that way. But yeah, so that's me. So I guess.
What is your experience in restaurants and party gigs?
Well, in Washington, D.C., I worked at restaurants, and I didn't really have a lot of problems with racism while I was there. I had a few more experienced dancers kind of lead the way. I was dancing with, I had some teachers who got me in subbing, or some friends that got me in subbing. But I always kind of thought that if I were a little bit darker, because as I explained this once, there's something called the brown paper bag test. And if you are about as light as a brown paper bag, you can kind of slide in without being too offensive with your blackness. But if you're darker than a brown paper bag, you know, then there's this additional racism that you get. So because I'm kind of light, and because I have curly hair or long hair or whatever, I'm able to be like exotic without people necessarily seeing me as too black. So colorism is definitely a real thing. And when I look at the other dancers in DC who are able to work, I'm pretty much the only black one. And there are some who is able to work in restaurant gigs. Like, there are a lot of amazing dancers in DC, in the DC, Maryland area, who perform in showcases, who teach, but they're not really performing for the general public. I'm pretty much the darkest one. And I found, like, if you're white and you're, you know, old, for example, or you're not slim, and, you know, these are things that white people, these are things that everybody gets discriminated against because of. If you're fat, if you're old, you know, if you can't dance, if you have all these 3 factors and you're still white, you still have a better chance of getting a dance job than a black dancer. Like, if you're a black dancer, you have to look good, you have to be slim, you have to be young, and you have to be a good dancer to really have a chance. But if you're white, you can just slide in. You don't even necessarily have, you can just be a mediocre dancer. I'm not saying that a lot of the dancers in DC are, but some of them are, and they're working a lot. So there's that. As far as parties, I never really had that much trouble, because sometimes people contacted me because they wanted a dancer of color. And sometimes, so I danced for a lot of foreigners when I was in DC, and I also danced for a lot of black families when I was in DC. So I didn't really face a lot of racism in the restaurant and party scene when I was in DC. But most dancers, I mean, I'm one of the few ones who was able to dance.
So you attribute that to your specific look?
I think I just barely made it. I think I'm just light enough, honestly, just light enough to be exotic without being like the black dancer, you know? Like, there's some really beautiful dark-skinned dancers who can't dance. Why? Why am I the only dancer who's black dancing in DC? I mean, there's Jazal, who was dancing for a while, but she was pretty light too, and she had her hair kind of dyed caramel. It was really long. She looked like she could be something else, you know what I mean? Yeah. But no one else is really getting hired at least the last time I checked. I heard there was some other dancer, Zaira knows what her name is, something like Chudney. Yeah, she's Afro-Latina, but she kind of has an Indian look. Nobody else really is dancing in DC professionally.
Have you personally seen any very dark-skinned professional belly dancer anywhere?
Not in my community, ever. I mean, no. Yes, in fusion, yes, as teachers. For example, Ebony is really successful, but she also doesn't perform mainstream belly dance. Like the dances that apparently she used to dance in restaurants for a while. But she's also an extremely good dancer, better than most dancers. I mean, sorry. And she also is very beautiful, like more beautiful than most people. So that helps. It's like almost to be accepted, you have to be better at everything. You have to be extremely good at everything just to be able to compete with people who are mediocre. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some really, really, really good white dancers, but not all of them, not all the ones that are dancing. A lot of them who are dancing are not good. Yes.
You feel you have to prove yourself extra just because of your race?
I mean, I don't feel like I do. I do. I know I do. I mean, yes. When I was living in DC and I wanted to dance abroad, this is before I started dancing in Turkey, I applied with an agent who books dancers in the Middle East. And the email I got from him was like, hey, look, no offense, your dancing is fine, but I can't book someone as dark as you. The hotels will not hire you. He even said, you know, your dancing is good. I mean, I have some dancers here who can't even dance as well as you, but I cannot, even if I take you on, I cannot book you. He said it to me straight up. I also had
what country?
Yes?
What country was that?
He was living in Lebanon, but he books dancers in Dubai, Oman, all over the Middle East. He is based in Lebanon. I think he's retired now. He's been in the game for a very long time, but that hasn't changed. Well, in 2014, I believe it was, when we were filming for Al Rakisa, there was this Tunisian girl. And as we know, Tunisia is in Africa. And she said, and at first I asked this girl, Janine, who's Lebanese, she's really sweet. She didn't want to hurt my feelings. And I already knew what it was about dancing in Arabic countries, but I asked her just to see if things had changed. I said, do you think I could work in Lebanon? And she said, I doubt it, but maybe you could work in Tunisia. So I went and I asked this Tunisian girl who, just to give you some background, hates being Black because she's internalized racism so much that she doesn't admit that she's Black. But Tunisians are African, and this girl looks a lot like me, different features, but same hair, same color. Anyway, she was recently married, and she was going around showing people photographs of her husband when they were on honeymoon at the beach. And she was showing people the photo, and she's like, this is me, this is my husband. He's not that dark though. We were on holiday. We were on the beach. He's really tan. He's really not that dark. Like, who cares? Anyway, so after I spoke with Janine, she's like, oh, go talk to, X dancer. Maybe, she's Tunisian. Maybe she would know. And I said to her, do you think I could work in Tunisia? And she said, I don't think so, because Tunisians really don't like Black people. She said this to me. She's Black, I'm Black, but she, as a Tunisian, that was her response. So that's part of the reason I decided, well, I had already lived in Turkey, but part of the reason I enjoy dancing in Turkey is because I don't really have to deal with a lot of that racism. There are other things I have to deal with as a dancer in Turkey. I do deal with a lot of prejudice for someone who works as a dancer, maybe being confused for a prostitute, or since I also work full-time, daytime as a tutor, I have to keep those parts of my life separate. People who know that I work as a tutor, people who know me as a tutor do not know that I'm also a dancer. But as far as dancing in Turkey, I haven't had to deal with a lot of racism. However, no one else, no other Black dancer is dancing in another Middle Eastern or Turkish country that I know of. There was one Black Brazilian dancer in Dubai, and eventually she just gave up, and she is teaching samba and performing samba. She has a group. She's very successful from what I understand, but she was not able to work as a belly dancer in the Middle East. She maybe got one contract.
So have you experienced racism outside of being a dancer, just in your life?
In my life, yeah, all the time. But it's more subtle than something, like nobody has ever said to me that I can remember, get your Black ass out of here, you don't belong. But I have heard things like, for example, I was talking to two young girls. I was young too. I think I was 23 and they were like 20, and I had taken a holiday in Spain. These girls were from America, and we were renting rooms in the same house. And one of these girls had a big nose, and she was looking in the mirror and she said, "Oh, I hate my nose." And, we're like, "Oh, your nose is okay." And she's like, "No, I really hate it. Do you think it looks like one of those Black people's noses?" She said this in front of me. And you don't know what to say. You're never expecting anybody to say something that racist. You're sitting around, you're talking, you've had a meal with this person. You don't realize how ridiculously racist they are. And I was like, I'm Black, right? And she's like, you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And I'm like, actually, I don't. I do, but I don't. This is why, I've had so many experiences like this, like people saying, you're not that Black, or, and a lot of foreigners will ask me where I'm from because they don't understand that Black people can come from the United States. I don't know, but that's not really racism. But I've had a lot of people ask me, I've had a lot of people say things to me like, you're not that Black, or, trying to separate me from other Black people with whom they feel less comfortable because I'm light-skinned, or because they're aware that I'm educated. A lot of Black people are educated. A lot of Black people have good grammar, or have, standard American grammar. I'm unique in that I'm a human being, but I'm not Black, because all Black people are different. All Black people, the Black experience is not a singular experience. If you're white, you just get to be, if you're white, you're a person, but if you're Black, you're a Black person. And it's you have to prove yourself. You have to prove yourself to be worthy if you're a Black person, whereas you're white. You can even see it when you're reading literature. Everyone is described by their hair color, their personality, their clothing, character traits. But when they introduce a Black character, and this is in almost all books, it says a Black woman. It'll say, oh, she has hair like corn silk, she had beautiful blue eyes, or she was as wide as a refrigerator, blah, 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 blah. But they don't have to introduce the race, because as a people, you assume that the person is white. But if it's a Black person, a Black woman walked in, or a Black this walked in. It's white people are people, and then everybody else is something else, if that makes sense.
It doesn't.
But if I was able to explain that. But yeah, that's how that is.
Yeah. You mentioned in our chat the term othering. Can you explain that?
That's what I was trying to say when people say to me, you're not that Black, because people maybe will feel more comfortable with me than they will with someone else who doesn't necessarily fit in to the, like, I'm able to talk to anyone without making them feel uncomfortable. I'm a people person. I was raised around a lot of different kinds of people, but yeah, a lot of, when you mean othering, I'm not sure exactly what we talked about, because the othering is the you're not that Black, or you're different from other Black people. All Black people are different. All people are different. It's not, you know, those Black people that we don't like, and then these Black people that are okay. All the Black people are different, and you can judge them, you know, as you get to know them. Like, how many Black people do you really know well? Probably not that many. I discovered, and I don't know how old I was, but I was young, and now it's really coming out. Like, they've been talking a lot about implicit bias that you don't know you have. You don't realize that you think you're better than Black people, but you do think it, because that's what you were taught to think by society, by your parents, even if you don't know it, even if your parents taught you to love everybody, you do have bias. And there's a lot of information on this right now, but I was very young when I realized that all white people were at least a little bit racist, even if they don't know it. And now I have and now there are a lot, and now there's so many explanations and studies that are becoming popular explaining why it is this way. Like, it's not necessarily the fault of the person who believes that they are superior, because that's what they've been taught. But now that you know that's what you're taught, it's your responsibility to get over yourself.
Yes, thank you for that. I think this is a good time to move on to Tarik, and then we'll come back to Lara and ask a few more questions for both of them, unless you have anything else to add about your experience.
Let me just, oh, no, these are the questions that you're going to ask us both. I think you've covered everything. And I think, oh, I would like to share one more experience I had. As I said, living in Turkey and dancing in Turkey, I haven't had many racist experience. How many, has it been 40 minutes already?
You're fine, don't worry about it.
Okay, I haven't had that many racist experiences. Like, the audiences have really loved me. Turkish people generally like brown skin. They like curly hair, almost to the point where it's kind of like a fetish. Like, I've had people say, oh, introduce me to a Black guy. I want to have mixed kids, which is weird. But I haven't really been like, oh, we don't want you here, you're too Black. However, I have worked with an agency who booked me for a gig and then called me back and was like, you know what? On second thought, my client might not like you because you're not too dark. It was because you're so dark. It wasn't actually the client. It was the agent projecting. And I also had an experience when I was working at Sultana's. And this was so painful and actually embarrassing. This really affected me. I was dancing at Sultana's, and sometimes we have, the people at Sultana's, they come, they're from every country in Europe, they're from every country in Asia, they're from all over the place. We also get Australians, South Americans, North Americans. Anyway, the only time I really dealt with racism there, so we had a huge group of American youth. I don't know if they were studying abroad, but they were about 20 years old. And they were super shocked to see me come out on stage. And, you know, you're dancing, you're flirting with this table or whatever. And this white kid was like, I don't want it. And I was like, you know, it was so insulting. I'm like, first of all, it's not on offer. Second of all, why are you trying to make me feel bad? You know, and it was definitely because I was Black. And even the people who were at the table, even the people who were at his table and who felt uncomfortable, no one said anything. And he heckled me for the entire 15 minutes. It was so infuriating and embarrassing and painful. Okay. What'd you say?
How did you handle it? What did you do at that moment?
When he said something like super rude to me, like one of his friends were like, "Oh, she's coming back over here again," because it's a raised stage, but you know, you do your rounds around the stage, you play up to the audience. They're like, "Oh, she's coming for you again." And he's like something about, "Oh, she can keep it," or something like that. I was like, "It's not for you." And then everybody at this table is like, "Oh, Chris," or whatever his name was. And then he felt a little embarrassed, but the heckling continued. Like it was intense.
Wow, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Sorry. How did you do that?
Thank you.
All right, so hang on. I will unspotlight you now and go ahead and mute yourself. Cancel. Okay. Then let me find Mr. Tarik Sultan. Unmute. And let me spotlight you.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, hello. How are you, Tarik?
I'm fine, thanks.
Introduce yourself. Tell us all about you. Where you from? What you do?
Okay, my stage name is Tarik Sultan, and I am from New York, but I'm currently living in Jersey City. What do I do for a living? Well, I was, hold on a second. I was primarily a dancer, teacher, and choreographer. However, in 2015, I went back to school full-time to be an ultrasound technician. I've recently graduated and I'm in the process of studying for my certification exam for ultrasound. My dance movement experience. Well, I started taking dance classes in 1985. Yeah, 1985, the fall of 1985. And in 1988, I made my first trip to Egypt, but my involvement with the dance really came years before that. Before I was involved in the dance, I was listening to the music. I'd been listening to the music for, well, many, many years before I, decided that I'd like to learn how to dance to it. And I would do a lot of research. I'd go to the Lincoln Center Dance Research Library and I would do as much research as I could to find out about the dance, because at that time, there were a lot of stereotypes about what the dance was actually about. And I wanted to make sure that if I was going to be involved in something, it was legit. When I got to Egypt for the first time, that's when I really started to learn what the dance really is, because I saw it from a native perspective. And in subsequent years, when I would go back to Egypt, I would try to hang out with the local people as much as possible and really analyze the dance from their perspective rather than from a perspective of just watching for entertainment. I began teaching in 1991, and after that I started performing in little restaurants in the Village in Manhattan. And then I started working in other restaurants in the New York City area, doing private parties, teaching workshops across the country and internationally. So pretty much that's my dance background. Okay, so my experience in restaurants and party gigs. Well, the big issue that I had was, of course, I'm a male. So I'm not exactly the stereotype of what people expect. So I had to pretty much talk myself, into the gigs, you know. So my deal was I'd go to a restaurant and I'd say, okay, so I'm a dancer and I'd like to perform. And of course, you know, you get the raised eyebrows and I'd say, okay, look, this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna dance on like a Friday or Saturday night when you have an audience. And if the crowd likes me, then we'll talk about, you know, like setting up a schedule, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't like me, then you never have to see me back ever again. Needless to say that all of the places that agreed to let me dance, I ended up, you know, working there for some time. My longest running gig was at Le Souk, which originally was in the East Village on Avenue B. And then they moved over to, what is that? Lafayette Place, where they are now. So I was there for almost about 12 years. That was my regular gig before I decided to go back to school. Let's see. So my experience in restaurants, I've always had positive experiences for the most part when I danced in public, no matter where it was, private parties. Usually what I found is that the first 3 minutes, everybody's kind of like, what is this? But after the first 3 minutes, it's like I win them over and they see that, you know, I'm actually, this isn't a freak show. I'm really a dancer and I know what I'm doing, you know? So,
What about,
positive.
sorry, what about private parties?
Private parties, I usually get people who have seen like my videos on YouTube, or they've seen me, you know, like on Facebook or something, or I've been referred to by, you know, referred by other dancers in the community. You know, like if there's a lady, she has a birthday party or something like that, and they ask, hey, is there, you know, are there any male dancers? And say, oh yeah, I know a guy. So in the New York, New Jersey area, I'm the guy, you know, I'm the only guy.
No, unfortunately, we need more guys. Where are the guys?
I tried to do my bit, but hey, what can I tell you? So for the most part, my experiences and how I've been received have been overwhelmingly positive. Of course, every dancer, you know, you do have, unfortunately, emotionally disturbed people in your audiences, and you have to deal with that. Like Lara was just talking about, you know, dealing with hecklers. As a dancer, when you're in the public, you have to have a tough skin, and you got to be good with the comebacks, because you are going to have people who think that just because you're up there in the public eye, you're a fair target for whatever, you know, crap they want to spew, you know. But I haven't had too many of those experiences, you know, knock on wood. The biggest obstacle that I've had is just getting people to look past the fact that I am a guy, you know, and that I actually do know what I'm doing and I can entertain a crowd. So that's been the biggest obstacle that I've had to face.
So who are the people who mostly hire you? Is it white, black, nothing in particular?
I think I get like everyone. I get white people, black people, Latinos. I haven't gotten that many Arabic people because I keep opening up my big mouth and letting them know I'm Jamaican and I'm not Arabic. But when they thought I was getting a lot of gigs until I let the cat out of the bag. Is that due to racism? It could be, because I mean, like, the overwhelming majority of dancers in the community are white. You know, I mean, they don't look Middle Eastern. And so it's just taken for granted that they're not Middle Eastern and they're still getting hired. But when it came to me, it's like, once they found out that I wasn't Egyptian or Moroccan, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, the phone stops ringing. So I think that's weird, you know. But I can't really say it's down to racism, but it's weird. No matter how you want to slice it, it's weird. You know, like, why should I have to do something or be something that everybody else doesn't have to be, you know? So, yeah, that is what it is.
Have you tried working in other countries, Arab countries specifically?
Well, I did have a contact. I could have gotten a gig working in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. But when I got to Sharm el-Sheikh and I saw what Sharm el-Sheikh was, and then when I found out what the gig actually paid, it was extremely underwhelming. You know, I was like, no, I'm good. So I never pursued it any further, but I could have if I wanted to, but I didn't see a reason to. There weren't enough perks, let's put it that way. There weren't enough perks being offered for me to uproot myself and go over there, you know? Mm-hmm. So I never pursued that. I've never been to Lebanon, but I heard that there were a few clubs where they did have male dancers, but once again, the pros didn't outweigh the cons for me to uproot myself, you know? So I never really pursued working internationally in that respect. I've worked internationally, you know, like teaching seminars and performing and stuff like that. But as far as having like a regular performance gig in a Middle Eastern country, no. I think knowing like all the social stigma that you have to deal with, that was one major deterrent for me. It's like, I don't see why I need to take myself to another country and be treated like crap when I can stay right here and be treated like crap. At least I know the language, you know?
And how are you perceived as a teacher abroad?
As a teacher abroad, I'm very much appreciated because, not to toot my own horn, but I am good at what I do. So I've never had any bad experience, well, except for one, Wisconsin, I'm sorry. I've never had any bad experiences. Overwhelmingly, majority of the times I've been very well received and I've had good experiences.
Okay, what about in your life outside of the dance world? Have you experienced any racism?
Oh God, yes. Listen, if I was supposed to sit here and like talk about everything, we'd be here. We could just have like a whole discussion just based on that. But yeah, I've had experiences, negative experiences with law enforcement. Being arrested for no good reason, being ticketed for no good reason, being assaulted by police officers for no reason, being verbally abused, being sexually propositioned, and just put in uncomfortable situations where I knew that if push came to shove, it would be my word against theirs, and I wouldn't be believed. So racism in this society definitely does exist, but you know, when people think about racism, they think about, you know, like the old South and that blatant kind of racism. What they don't realize are all the little microaggressions that happens. And you know, to add to some of the points that Lara was bringing out, you know, she mentioned that dancer who had internalized racism within herself, you know, and what I experience here in the United States is not only do we have internalized racism, but a lot of times we have immigrant groups who come here to the United States. And because there is this underlying chronic racial discrimination, it's like they know which side of the equation they don't want to be associated with. And so a lot of times you will see people who are racist because they've learned that to be American, you know, you have to align yourself more with white people. And in their minds, being pro-white means being, you know, anti-black. So you find a lot of people who really, a lot of the times, the people who are the most blatantly racist are not going to be the American white people, but will be people from foreign backgrounds who are trying to capitalize on their approximation to whiteness. You know, so what do I mean by approximation to whiteness? That means, for example, people from the Middle East and North Africa who are lighter in complexion, maybe. And so they're like, well, you know, I want to distance myself, you know, as much as possible from the other. And the way I can do that is to, you know, make a comparison between me and those people, you know, those African American, those black people. You know, I may be whatever, but at least I'm not that, you know? So you'll find that from North African people, you'll find that from Latinos, you'll find that from Asians, you know? Indians, yes, very much so. Indians, Asians, Chinese, Koreans who've been branded within the past 30, 40 years, the model minority. And a lot of people buy into that propaganda. And so they think that the way to be a good American is to be, you know, conservative, Republican, and to toe the party line. And, you know, come with all those speaking points. Like, you know, I saw a video on YouTube. It was a Korean couple, and, you know, they're talking about how disturbed they are because of all this stuff that's happening with George Floyd. And, you know, well, all lives matter. And it's like, really, is this what we're doing in 2020? You know, so that's a problem. And I think a lot of us, we suffer from that because we have that ignorance. And I mean, listen, I'm not African American, okay? I'm an immigrant. I'm a person of mixed race, predominantly African. But I recognize that as a person who is a first-generation American, I owe everything to the African American community. Because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be a citizen. I'm a citizen by right because I was born here. That's a right that was achieved because of the struggle of African Americans. All the rights and privileges that I get to enjoy were won because of African Americans. And I think that all immigrants who come to this country, you know, you got to take a test to, yeah, first generation American, me too. First generation American, Jamaican ancestry. Yep. Still got a foot back there. But, you know, when we apply for citizenship here, we have to take a test. I think one of the things that could be done to help the situation is everybody should learn, you know, as an immigrant, what they owe to the African American community to be able to have the right to come here and to apply for citizenship, to be able to have the right that if your child is born here, your child is automatically a citizen. That's not a universal thing around the world. I have friends who were born in Kuwait, who were born in Dubai, who were born in, different countries. They don't have citizenship in those countries. I know people who were born in Dubai and they have to carry an Indian passport, never been to India a day in their life. But they don't have Emirati citizenship, even though they were born there. So the fact that you can come here and your children can be born here and automatically are American citizens, you owe that to the African American community. And I think a lot of people don't understand that and they just take it for granted. And then, they have the gall to turn around and to want to jump on the bandwagon and castigate the people who made it possible for them to be here. Because quite honestly, in this society, African Americans are an easy target because the media focuses on all of the dysfunction within the African American community. And it's there and it's real. But what I'd like to say is, for all of these immigrants who come here to this country, did you all forget that in your country, there are parts of town where you don't want to go there if you don't know anybody there and you don't got a reason to be there? Like if you go to any Egyptian and you say Shubra, you say Darb al-Ahmar, if they're from Cairo, oh my God, no, that's not someplace we want to be in. Like, you forget that you have those same elements in your society. I mean, I've traveled around the world and I've seen ghetto bullshit everywhere I've been to. I've seen it in the UK. I've seen it in Egypt. I've seen it in Turkey. There's places in Turkey and Istanbul you do not want to walk in if you don't belong there. So let's not come over here and act stupid and act like we don't know what causes, dysfunctional behavior. We all know that there's a strong correlation between poverty and hopelessness and street crime. Okay? We all know this. So let's not come over here and act stupid. And those of us who are from here, let's not act stupid and act like we don't know that there's not a correlation between living in poverty and having to resort to criminal activity. Okay, because I was born 1967. I did a check 100 years from my birthday in the past. And I was looking at, the newspaper headlines to see what was, the big news in 1867. And every page that I looked in all the newspapers, Polish horse thief, Polish horse thief, Polish horse thief. Something was going on back in 1867 in New York with Polish people stealing horses. All the crime that I was seeing reported in the newspapers back then was dealing with people from the immigrant communities at that time. And what was happening? What position were these people in the immigrant communities back then? They were living in extreme poverty. So for everyone who want to know this, I would say pick up a book, The Jungle, by Upton Sinclair, I think his name is. Anyway, just look up The Jungle and just read that book. So you want to know why there's certain kinds of behavior in the African American community. Well, then we need to ask ourselves, why is it that the African American community suffers, has a segment that suffers from so much poverty, and economic deprivation? Because at the end of the day, people are people no matter where you go. So whatever is true for one group of people in one place is true for all of us. If we get put in similar circumstances, for better or for worse, you're going to see a similar outcome.
Absolutely.
But, you know, the other thing is that why is it that if there's dysfunctional elements in every community, why is it that we're focusing on the negative element? Why is it that we don't focus on the majority of African American people who are intelligent, educated, hardworking, upwardly mobile? We don't focus on all of the scientific contributions that African American people have made to world civilization. For example, we would not be having this discussion right now if it were not for an African American who invented the cell phone. We wouldn't be having this discussion right now if it wasn't for a Ghanaian scientist who perfected fiber optic cable. So there's a lot that people of African descent, African origin, African Americans have done for this world, for this country, that never gets talked about and never gets focused on. But the negative, the dysfunctional, gets pushed to the forefront. And so a lot of people come with these attitudes, and, you know, I might be going off topic here, but I think these are points that have to be raised, you know? Because there's two problems we're dealing with here, right? We're dealing with what's happening in the Middle East, and we're dealing with what happens here in the United States or the Western Hemisphere. And I'd say one of the common denominators that we have in both instances is the fallout from colonialism and slavery. Now, we're all very much aware of the history of slavery here in the Western Hemisphere from European colonialists. But what never gets talked about as much is the slave trade that happened in the Middle East, in the Islamic countries, which was actually a lot older and lasted a lot longer than the transatlantic slave trade. There are countries in the Middle East that didn't outlaw slavery until the 1970s. Mauritania didn't outlaw slavery until the 1980s. And so what happens in both of these instances, where there's been a history of African slavery or enslaving Africans, is this need to justify why they were doing that and to dehumanize African people, people of African descent, in order to justify it. So it's like, well, they're not like us. They're not intelligent. They're not attractive. Well, excuse me, but if Black people were so hideous and horrible, how the fuck do you explain somebody like me? You know? Obviously, that chocolate was looking really tasty to somebody, okay? Because there's a lot of ambiguous people like me running around, okay? So if it was that disgusting, why you all up on in it? Why you all up in it, you know? So, you know, just miss me with that bullshit right there. But it's a status thing. And this has nothing to do with logic, right? So looking at a place now like Egypt, for example, and other countries in North Africa, well, they've been colonized for like what? Well over 2,000 years by outsiders who were lighter complected, right? So it's not that there was any institution that was designed to disenfranchise people because of their skin tone, but after a couple of hundreds of years of you being ruled by lighter complected people, you kind of automatically make this correlation in your mind between lightness of skin and economic and political power. So a lot of what we see when we see that rejection in different Middle Eastern countries, it's reflective of a rejection that they have for themselves. because they've internalized something, and their rejection of the African American, what have you not, is a rejection of that part of themselves. Okay, because if we go to Egypt right now, I would dare say, and anybody who's been to Egypt, tell me if I'm lying or not, a significant, I'd say half, if not slightly half the population is this. And the further you go down south, you get more of this. Am I right or am I right? But when you look in the media and you look at the people who are portrayed in the media, they're trying to get as close to this as possible. And we know that the people who are lighter complected in Egypt are people who have a lot more Turkish ancestry, European ancestry. You know, it's a mixed population. So they are choosing the people who are more mixed, who are less melanated, to be in the movies, to be dancers on stage, even in the music industry, you know? It's like you look at the media and then you go out on the street and it's two completely different things altogether. So they're dealing with their own rejection of themselves. You know, when I can go to a pharmacy and I see them selling, what is it? Dark and Lovely No Lie Relaxer, right next to the Ava B. White, as in Ava, E-V-A, capital space, capital B, space, white, skin bleach cream. Yeah, they suffer from it too. So a lot of the times when we see those things, it's a reflection of how they feel about themselves. And what do you do about that? I mean, as messed up as it is, it's like, well, I can't do nothing for you. You know, it's messed up that I have to deal with the blowback, you know, for that. But that's a conversation they really need to have within their own society. And yeah, same thing with India. The good thing though with India is that people are now starting to have that conversation about, you know, these skin bleaching creams and, you know, like having, you know, campaigns, not light, still lovely, you know? But a lot of these conversations are being had because, once again, African American people and people of African descent here in the West have opened up that dialogue for people to start questioning these ideas that we have in our minds. So there's a lot of deprogramming that has to be done. And the way I look at it is racism in and of itself, we have to go back to its origins and see what that is all about. And racism, what needs to be understood is that racism is just one of many tools that the ruling elites in those societies have created in order to maintain their social, political, and economic power, right? But at the same time, there's a psychological component to this, right? And we can think of it, if we think of this as if we think of this as coronavirus of the mind, then it makes sense, right? It is a virus of the mind, and it's highly contagious. Anyone can catch it. So you don't have to be white to be a white supremacist. All you need to do is be around someone or in an environment where that virus exists, and you can become infected. And you start exhibiting all of the behaviors, all of the speech patterns, all of the talking points that you would hear from stereotypical white supremacists, white nationalists, you know? So what we have to do is recognize the fact that we've been swimming in a toxic pool, and a lot of us are infected, and that goes for all across the board, not just white people, but that goes for non-white people, even people of African descent ourselves. You know, but people learn, you know, just as an example, people learn very early, immigrant groups coming to this country very early, what side you wanted to be on and what you didn't. For example, everybody here, I would imagine, has taken the census. And you notice that on the census, what, you know, the classification for white includes people from the Middle East and North Africa. Well, let me ask you, if you got people from North Africa and the Middle East who are darker than this, how the hell are you white? Why are those people being classified as white? Technically speaking, do you realize that a Nubian who comes to the United States and has to fill out, you know, these racial classification boxes, a Nubian by the United States regulations is technically considered white? How did this bullshit start? It started because the immigrants coming from, at that time, the Levant, you know, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, when they came in the late 19th century, early 20th century, they petitioned to be accepted for citizenship based on the fact that they were white. And I guess the government went for it because if they didn't include them in whiteness, then what would that say about, you know, being Christian, you know, because Christianity is based on the worship of a Jewish guy from the Middle East.
Exactly. I know, it annoys me so much. Like I technically pass off as white, but I'm Jewish Middle Eastern from the Levant. I'm like not technically white, and I have to always just choose one or the other that does not apply to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I am aware of the inherent privilege that I enjoy just because of my external look. You know, I'm not from here, I'm not even American, but I fit in with this privilege automatically.
Yeah. I mean, me, I'm just a warrior. It's like I said, fuck you and fuck your boxes, and don't give them the answer that they want, because I refuse to play that game, because it is a game. And this whole thing of racial classification was designed to disenfranchise the people. First of all, it is a class system, and people of African descent have been designated to be on the bottom of the totem pole. And that's why you have something like the one-drop rule, where you could look as European as any European, but you had like a great-grandmother that was, you know, African descent, and you're considered 100%, you know, 100% African. Well, that was done because they didn't want mixed race people being able to be in a position where they could inherit wealth from their white relatives and pass it back, you know, to the darker part of the community. Because then that upsets the class barrier, right? If you have these people and you keep them, you know, disenfranchised economically and politically, and now they get wealth,
they're in power.
Now that unbalances the status quo. So we had to create the one-drop rule. But if you're a Native American, there's no one drop for you. It's like, no, you have to prove how much Native blood you have. And if you can't prove how much Native blood you have, a certain quantum, now they can take your land away from you. So all of this shit about checking a box, it's all some fucking bullshit that was designed to disenfranchise people. And that's why I don't play that game. So when people ask me if I'm Black, I will say no. And that's not my way of distancing myself from African Americans or people who do identify as Black. That's my way of saying I'm not playing this fucking game. I'm a person of African descent, and them's my kinfolks over there. But I'm also of European folk, and y'all just don't want to mess with me. And you know what? That's fine. That's your loss. But the truth of the matter is that these two groups that we have this dichotomy against, they're all different parts of the same family. All right? Anybody go take a DNA test, so-called black people, and at a certain point, you know, they give you your genetic relatives, the shit gets white really quickly. So in this country, we're dealing with a messed up situation where we've got people who are different branches of the same family who are living under an illusion of separateness, which was deliberately crafted. This whole thing of segregating people. These people live over here and those people live over here. That was deliberately done because when you get to know someone, when you live around people and you get to know them, you see them as being more human. You identify with them, you empathize with them. So the way that we create this barrier, we split people apart. And that's part of what happens, you know, when people come to this country, they see the separateness and they don't want to be on the bottom. So how do I make sure that I'm not on the bottom? I'm going to step on those people and pull myself up. And that's something that has to be changed. So, you know, bringing it back to dance.
Okay, hold that thought, Tarik, because I want to invite Lara back in. Do you have any other personal experience you want to share with us? Any particular story?
Oh.
Whatever you're comfortable with.
The times when, the one time when I was approached to do an event down in the DC area by an Egyptian promoter. And he specifically asked me, oh, but don't bring any black girls. And I was like, excuse you? He's like, yeah, because, you know, we got hip hop night and, you know, I have black dancers on that night. And I'm like, and now mind you, this is a guy who's from Upper Egypt and he's darker than me, like significantly darker than me. And I'm like, dude, you do realize where Egypt is, right? Like, and your mirror does have glass, right? And, oh, it's not that. It's just that we have, you know, the black dancers on hip hop night. And I'm like, so, all right. So the belly dancers that you do work with, any of them Egyptian? No. So what is their background? They're American. Oh, in other words, they're white, right? Like, so explain to me, you know, how is it that it's okay to hire white people who don't look Middle Eastern to dance on Middle Eastern night, but darker skinned people who could pass very easily for people in Egypt, in a lot of countries in the Middle East and North Africa, we don't hire them. Like, make it make sense. Needless to say, I didn't get that gig, but anytime I've had a chance to put on events of my own, where I could hire darker skinned dancers who definitely could bring it, I have. So yeah, I mean, it's still a problem. And here in the United States, maybe we can't do anything about things in Egypt, but we could definitely do things, you know, do something about things here in the United States. But I will save that comment for when we come in with my other co-panelists and we're talking about that stuff.
Yes, exactly. So I'm going to take your spotlight off and unmute Miss Lara. Unmute. Okay, there you go. All right. So, yes. So we touched upon it, but I would like you to directly address, is there or isn't there discrimination? Oh, I'm sorry, you're not. You're unmuted. Why is it not unmuting?
Okay, I think it's okay.
Good. So definitively, in your opinion, in your knowledge, to your knowledge, is there or isn't there discrimination in the belly dance community by venue owners, by other dancers, organizers?
Venue owners, I think, are more likely to be anti-Black. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I feel that it's like what I was saying earlier, that a lot of people don't realize they're racist. It's not necessarily that dancers are even trying to exclude you on purpose. It just doesn't even occur to them. It's like, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's clannish. I don't know. Like, I don't necessarily think that people even realize that Black dancers are being excluded. So I think what you need to do is actively, just like everybody is saying right now, just check yourself all the time. Like, even I have been thinking about how much I have internalized racism myself. Like, when I'm like, I went to the curl doctor to get a haircut, and I was like, make sure the layers are long enough. Because as a dancer, if you look too Black, people can say stuff. I mean, I've had, and I wanted to say this before, I had so much, when we originally talked, I had so many things to say, but I don't know, I got a little nervous with all the people here in the Zoom. But like, I have dealt with racism in Turkey, but usually from another dancer or from an agent, never from I had one person say to me, when I came back from Bodrum, after being, Bodrum is hot. I came back, and this other dancer said to me, "Oh, you really got a tan. In fact, you're too dark. You should go to a hammam, a Turkish bath, and scrub that off." And I also had, yes, Zaira. And I also had one dancer, an elder. I went to take some lessons with her, like an intensive. And I had some frankincense. I was like in my hippie, my hippie perfume age. And she's like, "Don't wear that perfume. Then people are going to say that all Black women stink." And it was like, I had paid this woman like 450 euros, And anyway, yeah, so racism is everywhere. My main thing is racism is everywhere. And people who are racist, people who are the victims of racism, don't even realize how deeply racism is ingrained in themselves. So, yeah. But what were you gonna say?
No, I wanted to listen to everything you have to say. But let me ask you both, how can we be more inclusive? How can we help our Black brothers and sisters feel and be more included?
You have to do it on purpose. Tarik, what about you?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and just start trouble. Because, there's something that's been weighing on me for many, many years now, and no one has ever addressed it. But back in 2012, the early, 12, 11, 10, 9, like around 2009, in that area, there was a promoter in Atlanta. Her name was Black Orchid. And she was extremely good at what she did when it came to organizing events. Long story short, she never got the support that she needed from the dance community in Atlanta. And everybody down there in Atlanta, those of you who love me, you love me, I love you too. You all know I'm telling the truth about this, but this is the first time that somebody has directly addressed this issue. The bullshit that went on with Black Orchid, having her events being sabotage being boycotted by the community in Atlanta. It really came to a head in 2012. She decided that, you know what, I'm not getting the support from the community here in Atlanta. I need to take this somewhere else. And so she decided that she was going to go to Colorado. Well, the thing is that there's a tribal event in Colorado. This was Memorial Day weekend, and it was a little bit too close to them, and she didn't feel comfortable with that. And the hotel chain that she was using said to her, well, you know, that date is already booked, but why don't you check out, you know, our sister hotel in Las Vegas. And so she decided to have that event, the Bad Boys of Belly Dance, of which I was a part of. It was me, Tito Saif, Mohammed Shaheen, and a few other male dancers. The idea of the event was really an expression of gratitude from the male dancers in the community towards our sisters in the community who made space for us. And this was supposed to be really about us, you know, showing gratitude and giving back to our sisters in the dance community. You all know that in Las Vegas, there was another event at that time that was very popular, the Intensive. And Black Orchid's event was deliberately sabotaged by the organizer of that event. You all know who she is, and probably she'll unfriend me on Facebook. Not like you ever freaking hired me in any way, so what the fuck am I losing? Nothing! Anyway. I mean, and I saw the emails. You know, when it was announced that Black Orchid was going to be in Las Vegas, she got a phone call and said, your event is not going to succeed. And she let it be known that she was going to do everything in her power to make sure that it didn't succeed. Mind you now, this event is in Memorial Day, and the Intensive was in September or sometime like late summer. And so what was the big deal? It's not like she was looking to set up shop in Las Vegas. She just happened to be there that particular year. And then she was going to look for another spot to be. There was another person in California, Bloom Bauer, who had some kind of group, and she was another person who actively worked against the event, you know, sabotaging it. I mean, I was watching all of this stuff while I was in Las Vegas, watching it unfold on Facebook and commenting to all the people who had every freaking excuse in the book as to why they couldn't come and support the event. And what really irks me are all the people in the Black community who didn't support her. And so once again, it's that internalism that we're talking about, you know, because they would much rather hitch their wagon to a big name, and that big name tells you, well, if you go to that, you can't be part of this. Or if you go to that event, you can't come, you know, to this, you can't take classes at this studio, you can't do exactly, you know? So Black Orchid, I'm telling you, I mean, the big mistake that she made is she kept bringing on more artists, more artists, more artists. I mean, the lineup that this woman had, she had Aziza of Cairo, she had Tito, she had Sema from Turkey. She brought people from Europe. She had a stellar lineup because she thought if she had like this kick-ass lineup, people couldn't help themselves but to come. But they left her hanging high and dry. And I'm telling you, if there was only, if there were 10 people who showed up to that event, that was a lot. And it was a shame because the hotel that she had the event in, it was off the strip, which is noisy as hell. This was a beautiful hotel that had a Moroccan decor. Quiet, peaceful, tranquil. And that event, the lack of support, it destroyed her because she literally put everything that she had into that event, all of her money. And when I say she put all of her money into it, I mean all of her money. She lost everything, everything. To this day, I haven't heard since 2012. The last thing she did a fusion event in Atlanta that I was supposed to be a part of, but I couldn't because the stress from all of that happened in Las Vegas. I caught pneumonia behind all that stress. So I couldn't come in. After that event, it's like, I don't know if Black Orchid is dead or alive to this day. But the level of toxicity that she experienced and that we let happen to her is unexcusable. So there's a lot of accountability that needs to happen all across the board. You know, there's things that need to be fixed in these venues here in the United States. Maybe we can't do anything about what happens in Egypt or Dubai or any of these damn places, but listen, you're here in the United States, you need to know that that shit don't work here. And those of you who are dancers and you're around these people, because they will open up their mouths and let all kinds of shit come flying out because they think that you're a safe space. Especially if you're down south, you need to let those people know. You need to check them and let them know that it wasn't so long ago that people who look like them had to sit in the back of the bus with the rest of us, or had to drink out of different water fountains, or were not allowed to go to the same schools, yada, yada, yada. So the fact that you can have an Egyptian community in Texas is because of all the bullshit that African Americans had to go through and giving their blood, literally, their blood, sweat, and tears to get things changed so that you could be here. The fact that we can have all the immigrants coming here now, you know when that opened up? 1965. Open up your history books and see what was going on in the United States in 1965 that made it possible for Lyndon B. Johnson to, you know, pass this law making it okay for all these different immigrant groups to come here to the United States. So when they open up their mouth with that bullshit, you need to check them. You need to check them on their bullshit. And what dancers could do in general is if you know that people are playing that game, oh, I'm not hiring her, she's too dark, shut them down. You know what? Oh, that's the way it is? Well, I'm not working here and everybody needs to boycott that establishment. Well, I guess you're just not gonna have any dancers. We as a dance community need to stand together better. And not only will it help the situation when it comes to situations of racism, but when it comes to situations of the shitty pay that we get, you know, that, you know, your white privilege buys you that shitty pay. And the fact that you could show up at any minute, any day, and they could say, oh, you're not working here anymore, you know? It would protect us from having to deal with sexual harassment and all of that kind of nonsense. It would protect us across the board, making situations for us as dancers and performers in these venues a lot better if we stuck together and we did what was right. So those are some of the things that we could do. And Black people, we need to support our own as well. Don't just sit here waiting for the white people to do it. We need to do for ourselves and each other.
About that, how do you both feel about all Black events organized by Black people, including only Black people? Does that help the inclusiveness, or does that keep the Black community further away?
Okay, well, I've been flapping my gums, so I'll let Laura lead off with this one.
Do I need to unmute you every time?
I muted myself. I think all Black events are fine. And to be honest, I also hadn't, this comes back to what I had internalized. But this, I didn't understand how people would say, the dance community is not inclusive, or blah, 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 blah. I was just kind of like, yeah, but the world is racist. Everyone is racist. You just have to do your best. And I didn't really, realize how, how important it is to really come together and, all work towards a common goal. So I think actually Black organized, Black focused events are great. Doesn't mean white people can't come. It just means maybe they're not the focus this time, I mean, I don't think there's any reason to, if there were a dance festival, I don't think I would mind having white people come too, if it were all Black. I don't think that's divisive. Either way, either Black people are saying, we want to do this for ourselves, we want to have a safe space. Okay, great. Or if you want to have a focus where we're saying, you guys can come, but it's not necessarily about you this time. Either way, I think it's great.
Yeah, there's a big difference between having an event where Black people get to be the focus, rather than, it's not about excluding anyone. It's the fact of the matter is that we just don't get the same opportunities. And so this is a time for all of us to come together.
And do it on purpose.
Yeah.
Support people, because it's not necessarily going to occur to you otherwise.
Yeah. Once upon a time we did have Boca, which was a good idea, but that's another uncomfortable conversation. But, at Boca, it was the main people who were featured were people of African descent. And, but other people were allowed to participate as well.
Other people came.
And so I would say, yeah, don't feel just because the focus is on, instructors and performers of African descent that you can't be a part of it. No, you don't have to feel excluded.
That's how it is for us most of the time. When you think about it, I was just looking at Facebook memories, and I was looking at this workshop I attended. I was the only Black person, but that's how it always is.
Yeah. You see, we're used to being the raisin in the oatmeal, right? We're used to that. So it's but we would never think that just because I'm of African descent, I can't go to this event, So by, the same standards, just because, yeah, Boca, just because all of the instructors are African-American, Black, however you want to describe it, doesn't mean that you can't also come and learn from these wonderful teachers who maybe you wouldn't have a chance to get to know or take a workshop with, because maybe they're not in your area or, where you can get to them. So that needs to happen. And I think, just for us, we do need to have those spaces where we come together. Just like, for example, even though I'm a male dancer, I definitely recognize the fact that there are times when women have to have their own spaces with each other. It's just an energy dynamic, There's times when women just need to have their own space with women, for women, by women. You know, and I just know, like, okay, well, you know, I sit this one out, you know, but it doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing thing. And I think that's a problem that a lot of us have, is that we think in these terms. It's like it's got to be all or nothing. No, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be everything, you know. There's times when we all come together as people of African descent to celebrate each other and to have our own, you know, thing. And there's times when we're part of the greater community, you know, we don't have to limit ourselves. The correct answer is B, all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah. How often do you see Black, African-American teachers and performers in festivals and such?
Rarely.
Yep, not that often. I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's. I don't know. I don't know if there's just not a lot of us, and it probably is because of all these things. Maybe we don't have people getting more involved because they don't see the representation, and therefore they just figure, well, you know, that's not a space for me, because everything I see is, you know, it's either white women or it's, you know, lighter skinned Latinas.
I could imagine getting discouraged after a few tries.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, Lara and I, we kind of just make it under because,
Yes, exactly.
you know, you know what I'm saying? Because we kind of like, you know, kind of on the ambiguous side. It's like, are they not? Maybe, well, maybe they could be, you know, like.
Maybe they are, but it's okay just this one time.
Yeah, you know, like there's some wiggle room there, you know, but people that are unambiguously, like, you know, that unambiguous Blackness, it's like, that's, you know, something else. I mean, but we're there. I mean, like, hell, even in Egypt, I mean, there's, oh my God, I can't believe that I'm blanking out. There's a Black dancer in Egypt, but she only dances for women's groups. She doesn't dance in nightclubs. What is her name again?
Aisha Barbakar?
Aisha, yes. Okay, so it's like Aisha, she teaches at festivals in Egypt. How come I don't see her nowhere else? I don't see her, you know, like all these festivals happening in Europe and in Asia. How come she there? You know, like
I've never seen a Black looking Egyptian dancer.
you know, I mean, I've only seen a dancer who was my complexion in Egypt once. And she was part of a dance troupe, the Hassan dance troupe. And that was the first and the last time I ever saw anyone, you know, like, so like I said, you know, Egypt, they've got their own issues that they need to deal with within their own society because, I mean, apart from the dance world, just the entertainment industry itself. I mean, there was Ahmed Zaki. He was a dark-skinned, you know, lead male actor. And now there's Mohammed Ramadan, and those are the only two. You know, and Ahmed Zaki, he's dead, you know? So now there's only one. But it's like, where is there the female equivalent, you know, a dark-skinned Egyptian actress, you know, who has leading roles in movies? Like, and you gonna tell me there ain't no dark-skinned people in Egypt? There ain't no dark-skinned women? I see them all the time.
I mean, all the famous dancers that you can think of right now, Samia Gamal, Tahia Carioca, Naima Akif, from the original golden era until today, when belly dance is pretty much taken over by Russian dancers. Even in Egypt and in Arab countries, that's who get picked and hired to dance mostly. Completely
Also
like
Latinas. Also Latinas, but the white ones.
Yeah, the lighter skinned, you know, white passing Latinas. I mean, even though, you know, like over here, the more tanned Latinas might get picked, you know, to dance, you know, do get picked to dance here. Even those Latinas in the Middle East, I don't think they would get much work, you know, because they'd probably be considered too dark, you know? Turkey is the only place where I've ever seen darker skinned dancers. I mean, there was, I don't remember her name, but there was, I guess she was an Turkish dancer. She had like this big curly hair, and she was maybe a shade lighter than you, Lara, but that was a long time ago.
I don't know any other dancer right now.
Yeah, she's probably not dancing anymore.
And I, although I do know maybe like one or two, I know 3 Japanese people who are able to dance in Turkey. Mm-hmm. Turkey is not as racist. Turkey's not that racist.
Not that racist.
I also wanted to say, thank you, B. Oliver. I see your messages. I also wanted to, before we go, and while it's on my mind, I wanted to mention some of the resources. Salit asked me if I could compile a list of resources. So what I did was put together like 10 Instagram accounts. Some of them are book accounts. One of them is a really good book account that she always posts a variety of books, but recently she's been posting a lot of fiction because you can learn a lot about the Black experience, which, by the way, is not, again, an all-inclusive experience. All Black people are different. And she posts a lot of stuff. The other Instagram accounts are either activists or Black artists, and they're all posting really great stuff right now. And I also wanted to say just a couple of book recommendations. Maya Angelou is really obviously brilliant and funny, and I recommend her whole autobiographical series because it tells about her life as an author, and it really explains, I mean, racism is a common theme throughout the book because she was a Black woman who was born in the late 30s or the early 40s or something. So it's throughout the book, and you can see kind of how it goes on and how it changes, but how it doesn't really change that much at all. So I really recommend that you read the Maya Angelou autobiographical series, especially the first one, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. I really think everybody should read that book. And yeah, another good one is Your Blues Ain't Like Mine. It's like 20 years old or 30 years old, but that's another great book. It's a fictionalized depiction of the Emmett Till story. And yeah, those accounts on Instagram are really good. And maybe consider buying, not that I don't think White Fragility is a great book. I actually haven't read it, but it seems like it's great. The woman is really, she really seems to know what she's talking about. I've seen a couple interviews, but also maybe consider buying anti-racism books by Black authors so you can support that community as well. I think that is what I have to say. There might be a couple more questions. I think that's it for me.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to add, first of all the books and accounts that Lara mentioned, she will email to me. I will email it and then post it on Facebook and post it in the comments or the description of the video on YouTube. So that is available for you clearly, and you can go check it out. I wanted to add one more recommendation of my own. I'm currently reading The New Jim Crow that it's been very highly recommended. It talks about mass incarceration as another form of racism and creating a caste system in America. And it's very interesting, very insightful, also by a Black author. So if you want to support that, I personally recommend that. Tarik, anything else we've talked about purposefully including Black dancers and putting people in their place when they talk badly about Black dancers, Black people, anything else that you want to add that we as individuals, we as dancers, we as a community can do?
Well, I think that's a beginning. All the things that we mentioned are a beginning. I guess, listen, just admitting, the fact that, this isn't, at the end of the day, this is an African dance. Let's realize that, all these myths we have about the origins of the dance, and the gypsies, listen, the way the body is moved in this dance is inherently African. And if you look across the African continent, all the elements that we have in our dance, the fact that for the most part it's rooted, in its folk form, rooted on the spot, it's torso and pelvic intensive, right? It's the articulation of the torso, of the hips, the shimmies, the twisting, the lifting, the dropping, the twirling, all of that stuff. You go to the dances in East Africa, in Kenya, in Somalia, in Congo, in Uganda, you look at those dances all across the African continent, you see these common denominators. And then you look at Egypt and the rest of North Africa, and you see that it's part of a continental matrix. So inherently, this dance is African. There are Asiatic elements in it because of where Egypt is in proximity to the rest of the world. So all of this stuff is coming from Central Asia. Those Sagat, that is coming from Anatolia. But the way the body is used is part of an African continuum. So let's just understand that, first of all. So when you talk about having people of African descent participating in the dance, it really shouldn't be a shocker because this dance is coming from Africa. It's just that different sections of Africa have their different flavors, but the common denominator is there. So just recognizing that, first of all, a paradigm shift, even in where we think this dance comes from, because Egypt is not an Arab country. I'm going to say that again. I'm going to piss some people off, but fuck it, you need to be pissed off. Egypt is not an Arabic country. Egypt is a country that was Arabized, because before the Islamic invasion, Egyptians had their own language, and it wasn't Arabic, okay? It was a language that is still spoken in the Coptic Church today and has no other parent languages outside of the African continent, all right? Egypt was and still is a part of Africa, always was, always will be. So we got to start decolonizing our minds, okay, and recognizing the fact that there is no one way to be African. There is no one way to look African. There is no such thing as a universal African culture, African language. There are many different cultures and languages in Africa. They all don't look alike. But when we're talking about certain things, certain cultural elements, there are common denominators, and the way we move our bodies is one of those common denominators that we find all across Africa. This is where the dance comes from. So to look at a person who is of a darker skin complexion and say, oh, that looks odd. No, that doesn't look odd. That's a more realistic representation of the reality of where these dances come from, rather than somebody who's coming from Ukraine or Russia. That's really being real. So recognize that the people who we're talking about here are not exactly alien to this. You know, we got some skin in the game, all right? And what can I say? You know, like I said, a lot has to be done to raise the level of consciousness here in this country. Can't do anything about the Middle East. You know, they're gonna have to work that shit out themselves. But for people here, for ourselves also, and for our relatives and our friends and our family members who are participating in white supremacist ideology because of their approximation to whiteness and the feeling of, you know, I want to be more, you know, American, and therefore this is how I do it, by distancing myself from these people. Listen, after the Native Americans come the African Americans, because they were here, all right? Africans came here at the same time that the Europeans came here. So they've been here since the very beginning, all right? African people have been here in what we now consider the United States since before the Mayflower, all right? When Christopher Columbus came on that voyage of discovery, there were people of African descent on that voyage too. Okay, there were people of African descent who settled in Florida too when it was under Spanish colonial rule. Same thing goes for Mexico. So they've been here. So for people to look at African Americans as being less American, that's a conversation that we need to have with each other within our families. They are just as American as any white Anglo-Saxon Protestant person, and definitely anyone who, any of the immigrant groups, the Polish, the Italians, et cetera, who came in the 19th century, in the early 20th century. All right, so they've been here and they are part of the foundation of this country, and that needs to be recognized. So when you're around people and they're talking this mess about real American, it don't get any realer than that. Because for the Africans who came here to the United States, they didn't have an option of someplace that they could go back to. If you came from England, if you came from Sweden, you came from Ireland, you had an option of someplace you could go back to. Black people who came here, this was it. You didn't have an option of someplace else you could go back to. So if you want to talk about who was the real American, and once again, let me say it so the shit doesn't get twisted here. I am not an African American. I am a first generation American of Jamaican ancestry. So for me to be saying it, it's really real. Okay? After the Native Americans, the first people to call this home were the Africans who were brought here, then the Europeans. So they do not get to be more American, you know, just because you got a lighter complexion. No. African Americans are foundational to this society, to this country. They're just as American, maybe even more in a lot of ways, because a lot of the freedoms and privileges that we have now were created by the hard work that African Americans put in. So for someone to come from overseas to come here and deny opportunities to the people who helped to found this country, absolutely unacceptable. And to look at them as less than American as anybody else, absolutely unacceptable. So go out, educate yourself, learn. You can go on YouTube right now and just pull up, you know, dozens of excellent documentaries about the founding of America. You know, the first Americans, the first Africans in America. I think that's the name of the documentary. Excellent series that talks about how this system of racial division came about in the United States and why. Educate yourselves, and then educate the people around you. And then we will not have to have so many of these discussions. But definitely, those Middle Eastern people that like to open up their mouth in front of you and let all kinds of crap come out because they think that, you're safe. And if they say that, they get brownie points from you, you let them know, you fucked up. No, I'm not a safe place for you to open up that crap. And then you educate them about this land that they're living on, this place that they now call home, and how it came to be. So at the end of the day, we all have to do our part. Black people, we have to do our part. White people, or those of you who identify as white, have to do your part. Latinas, Latinos, Asians, South Asians, everybody who's here, we all have to do our part in making this country be what it's supposed to be. So it ain't about let's make America great again. Well, this shit has never really been that great. Let's make America great, period, for everybody. If we do that, America will be great for everyone.
So let me ask you one last question. Let's try to end on a high note. What, if anything, makes you hopeful? What do you see an experience that makes you say, okay, this is a step in the right direction?
I'll defer to my co-host again.
This is something unprecedented. I've never heard so many people, I've never heard so many people who were not Black talk about how they wanted to end racism. I have heard a lot of, I'm not racist, or can you believe this racist? Not even that much from white people, but I've never seen so many people taking responsibility for racism. So for me, it's very exciting. I was talking with family who said something like, we're talking about how something is definitely going to happen. Either more power will be seized or it will end in some kind of equality, but something's going to happen. It's not going to go back to the way it always has been. For me, it's exciting because nothing like this has happened in my lifetime. My mother also says the same thing, and she was born a long time ago in segregated St. Louis. Nothing like this has ever happened. And we have the world's attention, and it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't all been on lockdown. Because even me, every time I see another tragedy, another atrocity against a Black person, I have so much stuff on my mind. I'm worried about my own money, my own mental health, my own relationships, and also you feel like you can't really do anything. So you're distracted by your own life. But now, we have we have the world's eye because everyone is at home anyway. And further, coronavirus has been disproportionately kicking Black people's asses. So there's that too. So yeah, everybody cares now, which is really exciting. This has never happened in this way, in this volume, with this momentum ever before. So it's exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also optimistic because as Lara said, people are having the conversations, and I think that's the beginning is, ripping the lid off and being real, So, but at the same time, we're also seeing pushback from people who have those antiquated ideas. I mean, I've had to unfriend 2 people. Well, actually, one did. Well, actually, they both did me the pleasure, and they unfriended me because I called them out on their bullshit. But now is the time to really grab the bull by the horns and really work towards making change. There's a lot of people now who are of a different mindset, and they want change. They do see the problems, and they want a better world. They want a better world for themselves and for their children coming up. So I am optimistic. But like I said, I do see the pushback that's coming from the other side. And you know what? I would much rather have them come out in the open and show who they really are than to be lurking, under the table. And I would like to say to my other Americans who are of foreign origin, a lot of times people will try to polarize us against each other. There's a lot of people, since this whole shutdown thing and the whole George Floyd thing, there have been a lot of people on social media trying to polarize Black people against Latinos. And I think part of what we need to talk about a broader conversation is that within this country, we're all focused on what happens to African Americans and Black Lives Matter and all of that. But at the same time, in communities, for example, here in the New York area, everything that happens to Black people and all of the dysfunction and all of the pressures that Black people face, Latinos are also facing it too. So there's also Latinos being executed by police, but this is what the society does. They highlight one against the other, and then they try to polarize one group against the other. Don't allow yourself to be polarized. If you're from an immigrant community, they're even doing it, they even trying to split up the Latino community itself over, people who have been here for several generations and they have their citizenship as versus people who are looking to get citizenship. So we have to recognize at the end of the day, like I said in the very beginning, we have to recognize that racism is one of many tools that was created by the ruling elite to maintain their political, economic, and social power. So once you get it, once you understand that, and you understand, once again, like I said before, that this is a virus of the mind, it's highly contagious, and anyone can catch it, you will be able to spot it when you see it. So don't just think that just because somebody looks like you that they're not infected, Quite often, the devil comes to you wearing your own face. So let's be aware of the fact that there are people who are trying to marginalize, definitely, people of African descent because they've been put on the bottom. But then they also play this game against different ethnic groups, trying to play one group against the other and trying to play us off within our groups against each other. And so we need to check that. We need to call people out because a lot of time people say ignorant things and they're not even conscious of what they're saying. So you don't have to get up and cuss people out, but just drop some dimes of knowledge to get them to, have you ever considered this? Have you ever considered that? And that's why the number one thing that we have to do, educate ourselves. So Lara gave certain things that you can look at. You can go on YouTube. There's tons of videos that you can get. Books that I can suggest. One is a novel by Anne Rice, of all people, Feast of All Saints, but it does a really great job of looking at how people internalize that racism within the society, Our Kind of People, another book looking at the Black elite class in the United States. The Sweet Hell Inside. One Drop by, what is her name? Her last name is Broyard, talking about her father who came from Louisiana and passed for white. All of these things, we need to educate ourselves on the psychological dynamic behind racism so that we recognize white supremacy when it's at play, whether it be coming from a person who is of European descent, whether it's from a person of African descent who has internalized it, whether it's from a Middle Eastern person or a Jewish person or an Asian person or a person. When we see the disease, we will recognize it. Just like if you were dealing with cancer, If you see cancer in somebody, no matter what they look like externally, you recognize the signs and symptoms, or HIV, you recognize the signs and symptoms of someone who's been infected, or coronavirus, you recognize the signs and symptoms, okay? They don't have to be Chinese to have coronavirus, as we all very well know. So recognize that what we're talking about here is a virus of the mind and the soul. Recognize the signs where you see it. Do not be fooled by the external cover of the book. Recognize it when you see it and deal with it appropriately.
Excellent words, Tarik. Thank you. I did have one last question, and then I'll turn it over to you, if the participants, if you have any other questions or comments to share. Regarding social media, belly dancers, especially belly dancers who...
Lara's trying to say something.
Sorry? Oh.
Lara's trying to say something.
Why can't I unmute?
My fault. I love this question. I'm just gonna get my phone. I just need to get my camera charger, okay?
Is everybody having a good time? Is everybody learning? Give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying this conversation. All the people lurking, give me a thumbs up.
Yeah, so Lara's back. I want to ask, how should belly dancers act on social media? Because as you all know, belly dancers, especially professional who do this for a living, we rely on social media to promote ourselves, and we have to post beautiful photos and videos and promote our shows and classes. But there's this whole fire going on right now. How do we address it, respect it, contribute, and still run our business on social media?
Lara, you need to unmute yourself.
At the very beginning, when the uprisings first started, when this like awakening first started getting wind, it was downright offensive to see people continuing to self-promote without any mention of what was going on, or something, you know, just as low effort as saying, you know, I'm really, you know, with everything this, I hope that we can all, you know, be as one, or something unhelpful like that. And then just continuing to go business as usual. This is what I'm doing. I had a great day. This is what I'm eating for lunch. But now I think it's okay, but I still think it's important to, you know, do whatever, like, for example, it's not necessarily me to post a bunch, to create and post a bunch of infographics about the state of racism, but I can share those things. And you know, so maybe you can share something that you've learned on your own personal journey, your personal anti-racist journey. Or you could also, you know, share Black artists or some other story. You should share other people's stuff. Like, even if you aren't necessarily creating the stuff yourself, you should help. You should help raise awareness by sharing stuff that you learned from, that you found helpful. In addition to doing your self-promotion, it was so insensitive for a lot of people to just, you know, this is not my problem. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and posting about, you know, my new online class. You know, it was so insensitive. It took a lot of people continuously saying, don't ignore this, don't ignore this, don't ignore this, before other people, you know, stopped ignoring it. So yeah, share your stuff, but also share other people's stuff. Don't act like it's not happening.
Excellent, thank you. Once more, I'll remind you that your kind donations are appreciated. If you want to support for learning from all this and you feel you do want to support in some way, one way to do it is directly supporting our panelists. And the rest will go to the Pretty Brown Girl organization, which I feel is very important to educate little girls in general, and especially girls of color, to love themselves, appreciate their beauty, empower through education, and give them confidence. So I'll drop the information for donation again in the chat, and I will open it up to you. We'll unmute you.
I'd just like to say really quick that I did put the information for the charity that I want to support in the chat. It's called the African American Planning Commission, and they deal with providing affordable housing for elderly people in the African American community so that they have, you know, housing options in their later years in life. And I put the link, it's also in the chat where you can go to make donations.
Great, thank you. I see it. You guys can scroll up the chat now. Let's see if there were any other questions by people who may have left earlier. And if you want to ask any question or make a comment, we had a Maria here. She had to leave earlier. She's an American living in Egypt right now, and she did confirm the ideal beauty in Egypt is light skin.
Yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. People love white. My brother works in Hong Kong, and he has a colleague. My brother works in entertainment in Hong Kong, and he had a colleague who booked some beautiful samba dancers from Brazil, Black. And the client was like, you know, they're good, but do you have anybody blonde? Like, really? It's everywhere. Really? It's everywhere. Like, yeah, there's a question from Sandra. What's the question?
Hi, everyone. I have a question. So I think someone already touched up on this, but I guess, like, I like to think of myself as, you know, okay, I'm a dancer and I'm a student and I'm attending festivals, but me in my position, I feel like maybe there's a lot of people in my position, but what can we do? The little people, like, what can we do to, I guess, help, I guess, in the dance movement? I'm not really sure, like, what I can do in my position. So I wanted to, yeah, ask, like, what do you guys think?
I think Tarik answered that question by what he said about, if you see something happening, then, you know, if you see something, say something, kind of a thing. And supporting could be, you know, instead of, there's some great Russians who teach Iraqi dance or who teach Gulf dances, but there's also Khadija, who is Black, and she's actually from the Gulf. So maybe you could consider, you know, not you specifically, but, you know, one could consider checking out her classes instead of just necessarily going straight to the Ukrainians, you know.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, like supporting people, you know, supporting people who definitely are talented and they're out there, you know, like make the effort to give them support. Maybe you can speak to your teacher in your area, you know, about bringing in, you know, particular artists of African descent, you know, to do workshops, things of that nature, or, you know, like performances and events. And, you know, just in your day-to-day life, outside of the dance world, when you hear things or you see things, you know, speak up and let people know that's not okay, because a lot of the reason why these things continue to happen is because good people stay quiet, you know? I mean, like when they asked people after World War II, you know, like, why didn't you do, and, you know, why did you do? Oh, I was just following orders, you know? Bad things happen when good people stay quiet. So the more vocal you are, you aid in creating that paradigm shift. Because when people open up their mouths with these racist comments, they do so because they make the assumption that the rest of us are in agreement with it. And so if we get to that place where, oh, I'm shy and I don't want to, cause any controversy, well, then that assumption goes unchallenged. But if you make it uneasy for them, if they know that when they open their mouths, they're going to be challenged, on that bullshit, they'll be less likely to voice those things. They'll be less likely to act in those ways because they know it's not accepted. And at the end of the day, human beings are social creatures. We want to be included. We want to be part of the group. So if they know that, the group considers that this kind of behavior is not acceptable, they will start to change. But as long as they think that they're unchallenged, it's going to be business as usual. So those are the things, you're not a little people. You're not a little people, okay? Because without little people like you, there would be no dance community. There would be no people like me. There would be no festivals and events, because who do festivals and events need in order to be successful? Quote unquote, so-called little people. All those people that like to walk around with their ass on their shoulders like the sun rises and sets on their left butt cheek and goes down on the right, they wouldn't be where they are without you. Okay, boo-boo? So don't matter where they come from in Egypt or whatever, if it wasn't for people like you, they would not have a career. So recognize your role. You are not a little people. Let's change that mentality.
Yeah, exactly. I know there are specific teachers that personally had issues with. I've heard stories. I know they act a certain way. I choose not to support them. You may be an amazing.
Don't support racists. Don't support things that are not inclusive. Exactly. That's another great one.
Exactly.
By the way, I wanted to mention, we're asking specifically Lara and Tarik because they are professional dancers and they have insight from the dance aspect, from professional dance aspect, and as Black individuals, but they're not experts in all Blackness, and we're asking for their personal opinion on what they want us to do, but they're not experts. If you want to research more, they are not necessarily the people. They can maybe guide you to other people, but remember that your Black colleagues and friends are not your experts for Blackness.
That is such a good point, and that's something else I wanted to bring up, and I know we're closing, and I actually have to go myself because my friends are going to take me out for my birthday, which is tomorrow. But what I wanted to say was, yes, if there are 30 people in the room and there's one Black person, that person can only speak for herself or himself. If I can, one thing that I would like to drill into most people is Black people are not that caricature that you have grown up with. All Black people are individual human beings. I cannot speak to a person who has, I even felt like a little bit guilty, oh, I'm sharing my experience on racism. I mean, there are people out here who have really had it difficult, which also is ridiculous because no one should have to deal with this. But, I just really would love to drive it home, not necessarily to this group of people, but in general, Black people are individual human beings. And, we all have different feelings and we're all different. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, yes, Lisa, you want to say something?
Lisa.
Hi, guys. First, I really, really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your knowledge and in such an articulate way, both of you. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, not by any means to minimize the specific subject that we're on, But do you feel as passionate about other types of discriminations? Like I'm covered with tattoos, and I've gotten restaurant owner tell me, we love your dance, you made all the people come up and dance, and but we can't hire you because we don't want our customer to sit and be uncomfortable, or if a woman is a little curvier than what, or do you feel as outraged about it, or we are just dealing with one specific thing? Another thing that I wanted to add is when we talked about all black events, I got a little bit uncomfortable because I am a Libyan. You know, my father was born in the Congo and I was born in Israel. Both my parents are Arabic, and so I am always checking the box of other, but now I'm not going to check any box, by the way, because of you guys. But I feel like, you know, if there's already events that are celebrating that beautiful skin color and the difference, why not invite a couple of white ones just to say, okay, we're including everybody, and this is how we're going to start the revolution, and not necessarily segregate. I mean, this is just a little concern that I got when I heard your response to that, because I was like, okay, if we're going to start something, let's do it right. So this was just, and of course, my original question is like, do you feel as annoyed and pissed off about, like somebody like me who are just like, I love the dance, I love the music, I am totally into it, and I have to get a lot of no's because part of my life I wanted to do my expression with tattoos, you know?
I really would love to respond to both of those. Sorry, Tarik, you can too. But I wanted to say, first of all, you can use professional grade makeup to cover up your tattoo.
I refuse to because I want to be what I am, and I don't think that, you know, I should kind of like tailor myself to them. I want the problem to be uprooted, like in complete. I want the solution to be real, you know?
It's a lot, but okay, but I understand that, but that is something you cannot do as a Black person. Like, you actually don't have the option at all. You can make a choice to say, I'm going to perform only in the spaces that appreciate me in all my beautiful tattooed glory, or I'm going to conform and I'm going to cover up my tattoos and I'm going to get this job because I want to dance. A Black person does not have that option. The second point that you brought up is, you know, I think belly dancers of color, I did think they had a couple, they definitely did. They had this white girl, Namira, teaching Bollywood or Bhangra or something like that. They did include some non-Black dancers, teachers. But again, white people get all the juice all the time. So if a Black person wants to have a festival that's all Black, just let them just maybe do it. I mean, I'm not a festival owner, so you know, so I've never done it, but, you know, I said, let them do it if they want.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing about it is, if there are events that are predominantly Black people, when you compare that to the amount of other events, it's like this much, you know? And even when you do have those events, it's never been a situation where white people were excluded. They can come, they can take part in the workshops, they can perform in the shows. But, you know, if an event like that is happening, there's a reason why it's happening. There's a reason why we're bringing all these people, because these are people who probably they don't get as many opportunities to teach, to perform. And
you wouldn't go to an all-white festival and ask where the Black people were. It wouldn't even occur to you.
Exactly. And so this is an opportunity where you get to have all of these people of African descent in the industry in one place. Most people probably don't even know who some of these people are, or realize that they even exist. So having an event like that is really giving these people an opportunity to get their faces out there in a way that they probably wouldn't have, ordinarily. So it's not quite the same thing of exclusion. And like Lara was saying, like, I understand where you're coming from with your tattoos, but that is a choice that you're making, They don't make any industrial strength anything to cover up all of this. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. I mean, we do make a lot of concessions as it is, just on a daily basis. Like, just being able to wear our natural hair in the state that it grows out of our scalp. I mean, shocking as it may be to some people, but Black people were not born with weave. It's like, a lot of times,
so comfortable.
yeah, like even when we do get those gigs, we still have to cover up part of who we are, because the side of an afro, oh, this is like some kind of Black radical, like, is this some kind of political statement? It's like, there's just so many levels of bullshit that we have to deal with. I mean, can you imagine going to a job and someone telling you that your hair, the way it grows out of your head, is unprofessional? Or can you imagine an Asian person, showing up and being told that they have to tape their eyes to make them look wider because slanted eyes are not professional? But this is what Black women have to deal with on a regular basis if they want to show up to work just with their hair, natural hair, the way God made it, grow out of their heads. There's a lot of times people are told that, they can't get a job because their hair is kinky. And, can you wear a wig? Can you wear a weave? Can you straighten your hair? Or, being told that, going to school, you cannot wear hairstyles that were made for the natural texture of your hair. So these are ways that we are made to feel invisible and diminished on so many levels. It goes way beyond just dance. So just to have an event where we can all come together, and like I said before, there's times when just on an energetic and emotional level, we need to be with each other. Just like there's times when women have to just be with women, you have to have a space just for women to be, yes, equality, yes. But let's just be honest. There's times when you as a woman, that having a man there, and not even a man who's being sexist, but just having a man in the space, it just changes the energetic dynamic of the situation. And women do need to have that time where it's time for women to be with women. So the same thing goes across the board. There's times when men need to be in male spaces, and there's times when people of African descent in all our various variations need to be with each other, just so that we have that, that space for healing, So it's not by any means an exclusion of anybody else, but, there's times when, we just gotta be amongst ourselves, or we get to be the ones who are the majority for a change instead of the minority, There's times when we don't want to be, the raisin and the oatmeal, Yeah,
I would like to make another point. We are talking specifically about racism against African descent, African Americans, Black people, but the racism it goes far, but like the tattoos is one way of discrimination. Different body types Asians, a lot of Chinese, Japanese, they cannot work in restaurants in most places. Like I know here in New York, there are a lot of Japanese that created their own show created by Japanese dancers. Of course, not exclusive, but because they were not given the same opportunity. So it's broader, like the ideal is just generally white. So there are a lot of things that fall out of that category, not just black.
Here's the interesting thing though. When people of African descent open doors, automatically other people who have been excluded, that door gets opened for them too, automatically. You know, so when we get to the point where those doors are no longer closed to African Americans, those doors will no longer be closed to Asians either.
That's true.
Just like the situation with citizenship. When African Americans won the right for citizenship based on birth, that gave everybody the right for birth, you know, birth citizenship. So everybody benefited. So in a lot of ways, Black people are the gatekeepers. We're the ones who open the doors that allow other people to be able to come in.
Good point. Good point. All right, I know that this has been taken. It's good. We can talk about this all day.
Yeah.
I know some people have to go. I know Lara wants to celebrate her birthday, so happy birthday, Lara. Just any final comment or question that is absolutely burning that you want to bring up right now before everybody leaves?
It was great. You guys, yeah, covered a lot of great topics and a lot of good sound bites and, you know, like ghetto bullshit all over the world. I love that. And the concept of coronavirus as an infection and treating racism as a disease. I think those are good concepts. And yeah, it was great. Thank you. I know. I'm a writer more than a speaker.
All right, thank you. So thank you so much, Lara Adrienne. Thank you so much, Tarik Sultan, for your time and your openness. Thank you for all of you to participate and listen and wanting to be a part of the change. We appreciate it. I know I learned a lot, and this inspired me to continue and find out what else I can do. And I hope this conversation inspires more conversations and inclusiveness of our Black sisters and brothers.
Last lick. Okay, so for those establishments that are practicing racism, colorism, put them on blast. If you are a dancer and you have gigs in a particular restaurant or whatever, and you know Black dancers, dark-skinned dancers who are definitely on the professional level, who could do the gig, you know, ask them to cover for you. And if that establishment has a problem with it, call them out on their nonsense. And if something should happen that establishment lets go of that dancer because of the decision she made, everybody else in the dance community, all the dancers in the community, boycott that club. Don't go in there and take up work for them. Let them hire that dancer back. Let's all stick together and have each other's back. And then the club owners will know, you fuck with one of us, you fucking with all of us. You know what I'm saying?
Excellent point.
Yes, that applies to everything, not just
That
racism.
applies to everything. Mm-hmm. Maybe we can start making money out of this shit once again.
Yes, Belly Dance Union, we need it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for organizing. Goodbye.
Bye, sweetie.
Bye.